Hello there. Welcome back to Moving with Meaning, the podcast where actions have meaning, words have meaning, and we open up the conversations to discover what's your next move. I'm your host, Crystal. I did make a promise to keep dropping episodes which give you some closure on some topics from my previous podcast. You didn't think I forgot, did you? But first, we need to set the theme. So, the word of the day is optimism. Essentially, having confidence and hope about a successful outcome. But this is the idealistic side of optimism I'm talking about. When you have all the good intentions and positive attitude, but fail to realize those yellow warning flags, which leads to an unrealistic conclusion. I purposely positioned this episode after the expected episode because it's a perfect lead into me explaining my perception of why my previous podcast dissolved, along with the friendship of my business partner. Notice I said dissolve because the podcast didn't fail. It was gaining momentum. But all things on camera or recording, in this case, aren't what they seem in the backstage. Can I get an amen? Now, this is bound to trigger some controversy. Not with me and my ex-business partner, but perhaps her community, her support system. I mean no harm or disrespect. Remember, on this podcast, we talk about all the things we should, but don't. So let's do this. In today's episode, we are going to talk about the experience I had when starting a business with a friend, the various points of contention, my responses, or rather how I compromised in those interactions, to ultimately what ended the friendship. Because why? Just because we didn't fit as business partners didn't mean we couldn't continue as friends. But how you go about things reflects how you view someone. All right. Let me go ahead and get on into it. Okay, the approach. So, for the record, this was an arm's length person to me. I'm sure she is really close with some of her other homegirls, but just with me, I always kept some distance. This is because of some interactions I had in our early adulthood that had me feeling, some type of way. Almost like she wasn't the same person that I had sleepovers with during high school, talked on the phone every night, again in high school, and spent college summers with. We even coached a basketball team together before. As we said in that particular podcast intro, we were reconnecting. So let's shine a bit of light on that. Well, we typically check in via text every once in a while. I'm talking multiple months in between texts. There was one text where I let her know that I started back writing and I had finally finished my book. She was very congratulatory and supportive. I then let her know that I was in the editing phase. That was it for that text. She sent another text, again months later, asking how things with the book were going, and she mentioned that she was encouraged to write her own book about the journey she was on. I was equally supportive as she was of me, and you guessed it, that was it for that text. This next text is what set us on the idea of a podcast. This, again, was not my idea. I'm just saying. But she texted me about the progress of the book again. So let me pause here 1 sec. So you may be wondering, why is it taking so long for this editing process? Because each of these texts are like 3 months apart. My main genre is epic fantasy, like, Hunger Games and Lord of the Rings or Game of Thrones, Harry Potter, that kind of stuff. Those books can be quite lengthy because of the plot and character development and setting up the, air quotes here, world, if you will. So to edit 400 plus pages took about 8 months. So I hope that answers why things were moving at what seems like a slow pace. So she expressed how she was struggling just to put pen to paper, and also how she would market it. I told her she needed to research because I haven't gotten that far. But for me, I was just looking to start a blog, and maybe she should consider that. Goodness knows that since I hit this marketing phase, it's way more than that. Yet another episode. So she called me right after that text message that I sent, which is really rare because she's a texter. She basically said she didn't want to do a blog because she wasn't a writer in that respect. But what about doing a podcast? I was hesitant, and here's what we call rising action in the author world. And my therapist helped me figure this out. So my therapist asked me this question. If you were hesitant, what did she say that sold you? I thought about it and I said, I said, you know what? She referred back to a time when we coached a basketball team together in our 20s. Literally, I was 20. And we had a really good time and worked very well together. Basically, that drew out a fond memory from our friendship when we were closer, still arm's length, but closer than what we were at this particular point in time. I said, screw it, let's go ahead and do it. So, consideration before we go into the next phase. If this was not my idea, and I accepted being part of this venture, did that make me any less of a contributing partner? All right. Next phase, the vision and setup. So, initial setup. So, right up front, we had 2 different ideas how we would be going about this podcast. I was only looking at this as just a conversational podcast where, we just talked, obviously about a specific topic, but that's what I was thinking because I had a lot of other stuff going on. I own my own consulting firm and had 3 accounts. And I also had my book and the sequel to that book in the works. So high energy, low effort, and low cost. That's what I was looking for. This was not close at all to what she had in mind. She wanted to register us as a business and start trademarking our stuff, like our logo and our name and our tagline. So this, to me, is the first yellow flag. Why didn't we just record 10 episodes and see how we felt about it, and then start the investment? I'm in the proof of concept state of mind because I hadn't planned on budget or dedicating much time to this. But I went with it. Now, she wanted to go big, like incorporation big, because she saw what we were going to be. I suggested we just do an LLC because it's easy and we aren't big right now, right? Let's think of present tense. Her response was that if we did the LLC and then have to incorporate, that's a lot of paperwork and she didn't want to do that. So, second yellow flag. She's an attorney. So at this point, I'm just believing what she is saying, but in the back of my head, I'm thinking, well, if this is your niche and that's what we need to do, then that's what we need to do. Secondly, she went and consulted her CPA, and guess what? He said to do the LLC, but the way you can set it up, it'll look like a corporation, which would make the transition simple. We ended up doing the LLC route anyhow, but that's kind of how it ended. Thirdly, I consulted my own lawyer after we decided to not do this. And I walked him through this scenario that I just mentioned here, and his response was with a huge amount of sarcasm. It's not a lot of paperwork, and if she's an attorney, she should know that. Third yellow flag. She also asked me if I wanted to hire lawyers to do all of this, and it would cost us thousands of dollars, or if she did it, she would have to brush up on all the latest laws. So here's where I am thinking she doesn't plan to do much of the actual legal work, but wants to make the legal decisions. Also, that lawyer I spoke to that I mentioned just now said that it wouldn't have cost that much. But at this point, I am taking her word because, well, she's a damn attorney. And why would she lie? Well, we were stuck for several weeks just trying to pick a name because she was more literal and I was more witty. But without a name, we couldn't do anything, so I just basically waited. Fourth yellow flag. We were texting back and forth ideas of the name, and you could really tell we were on different pages. It got to a point where she would ask me when we could start recording, and I said, when we get a name. She took that as me talking to her like she was stupid. And those are her words, not me. I just answered the question that she asked, and I even explained that we can't record and introduce ourselves but not say the name of the podcast. It just didn't make any sense. We were just wasting time. If we were going the proof of concept route, that would make sense. But if we're starting to registering ourselves and creating a brand, we don't need to be starting recording until we have a name to start putting it out there. Anyhow, finally, a name was agreed on, and she went about the registration while I started looking up all the tech stuff. Remember? IT guru here. Not really guru, but IT background. Now me, I planned on doing as much myself as possible because, well, it's free. So I researched and found a good podcast host platform. I found free recording and editing software. I even used Canva to design our logo, which she approved. We'll get to that in a minute. So the next part is the website. So because she wanted to do merch and provide services and all that stuff, we couldn't just use the podcast webpage that the hosting platforms give you for free. I had to build this, and I went looking. So I started with a build your own web builder, and I was not impressed. Their features are limited, and the customer service really wasn't that good. What are we on now? Fifth yellow flag? Well, while I was designing the website, she was trying to ask for all these extravagant things that required coding, and I'm like, aren't you presumptuous to think you can ask me for all this stuff when you hired a whole legal services company to do all the legal paperwork you didn't want to do? I just said that I am doing what is needed, and all the bells and whistles we can hire someone else to do. And we did. I'll admit, I didn't consult her on an upgrade that I spent my own money on, which I acknowledged. She told me later that when I did that, she lost trust in me and had to build that back up. When she told me that, I said, didn't I apologize to you and say that I was going to put that cost? Also, you would be getting what you want that I cannot do. She said, well, yeah, you did. So here I am thinking, is she looking for any reason to hang on that would lower my value in the partnership? Anyway, I ended up firing those people and using Squarespace, and it did exactly what we needed. One time, she said she felt like she had no say in the design of the website. I was like, how? You have contributor rights and can do whatever you want. And then, of course, she started doing that, and she changed maybe the ordering of these 3 pictures and updated some verbiage. If that was all you were going to do, why are you going through the trouble of mentioning this to me? See, this is why I only have a clutch of friends close to me, because I don't need these accusations, which have no grounding, just projections. Now, let's go ahead and zoom on into the production. Finally, we are at the point where we are recording. So our original vision of this was to talk about mental health in the Black community through our own stories of vulnerability. So sit on that. After each recording, I would do all of the producing, like editing and fixing any sounds, getting rid of long pauses, things like that. We would have another session where she would add in her edits before we finalized. So finally, we are at the point where we are scheduling the episodes, of which I did 90% of the episode names and descriptions. Then we got to market these episodes on social media. She doesn't dabble a lot in social media. Well, if I'm honest, she doesn't do it at all. What I did know was that this was going to take 18 months and sometimes more to generate a following. She didn't anticipate that and even called me once and said, "We got to focus on marketing because we're not hitting the numbers." I said, "It's going to take some time." Her response threw up yet another yellow flag. And I'm not counting these anymore because I already feel like a simp just telling y'all this. She said, "I can't wait that long. I don't have the mental capacity for that." I'm like, WTF? Why did you do all this registration and trademarking and stuff if you weren't in it for the long haul? I basically said, "So you want to pay for marketing?" She was like, "Sure, let's see and do it." Meanwhile, our husbands quickly gave us a hard no. That meant we had to go with sweat equity. What I told her was that I cannot do that because I am busy doing all this content creation for social media, which we need to post every day, and I was managing these posts on all our outlets. She was going to have to do the marketing. This is the perfect place to mention yet another yellow flag. One of the marketing pieces is your elevator pitch, which we had, but she said after we've recorded a few episodes, she had changed her mind about the vision. And I'm thinking, that's fine and all, but that's a collaborative decision, and she was just making these calls. Sounds a little like the pot calling the kettle black, if you ask me. Also, in the beginning, the content creation was very bland because that's how far she could see. But me being in IT, I have done seen some shit, and I'm like, we really not doing nothing. Also, she would tell me to send her all the captions before I posted so she could approve it. And then she would change my words. Let's just say, when you do that to somebody in a creative setting like that, you immediately devalue them. And that's what I felt. Whoever I tell this part to has a look of, bitch. Like, who do you think you are to change someone's expression? Like I needed to be reined in. Now, we had a talk about that, though, and came to an understanding. I literally told her I worked as an executive at one of the most notable firms. I know how to write, but we're not in a corporate setting. We need to be willing to be creative if we are going to sound interesting and stand out. But how dare you is all I was left with. Actually, in one of our business meetings, I said, I'm done, and she could find somebody else to work with. Now, I wasn't mad. I was hurt. Like, I was crying because I was losing respect for her as a friend, and I didn't feel I was getting any at all from her as a business partner. Her reaction was, for lack of better words, devastating. She said, let's work this out and talk first because this is a business. But we are friends, and I believe anything can be worked out as long as we talk. That's when she told me about her losing trust in me because of the whole website thing, and I told her the disrespect of altering my expressions. Things got better for a time. Keep this in mind. I called her to discuss this because as friends, and just in business in general, that is how you resolve issues. If I were to have just texted her, I'm out, and she is free to continue with whoever she wanted to, that would have been a huge slap in the face. I didn't want to do that because the friendship came before the brand. For me, it did. Now, I already feel myself getting worked up, and I don't need to take another nerve pill, so I'm going to stop there. So here we are, the end of an empire. Now, I use that term, empire, because that's where we were headed with the kind of episodes we had. things came to a head when she wanted to start focusing on marketing. Like I said, I was focused on all the IT stuff and content creation. By this time, she had experienced creating content and basically said, you got that. In my head, I'm like, yeah, it's easy when you are over there sitting there waiting for somebody to send you something to review and tell them all the changes and stuff that you needed them to do versus being the one doing it. But then she said she wanted creative ownership of the audio because she felt she had a good ear for it. I just said, okay, it's yours. You got it, girl. But was it okay? Because she was changing how we did the episodes constantly. And the way I interpret someone wanting change is that you are not getting the results you want out of me. Let me explain. In podcasting, if you get like 31 downloads within 7 days of the episode's release, the numbers may be different now, but you are in the top 50 percentile of all active podcasts. That's why I keep telling y'all to go ahead and download those podcasts. Get my numbers up. Anyhow, our first 4 episodes had 60 plus downloads, and the others were just below that 31 number. So I'm looking at the data and saying, well, what's not working? So I kept asking her, why are we changing? Because when I sent her some content, I explained it so she understands where I'm coming from, and I incorporate her feedback. It took me several times of asking her, why are we changing, before she finally said it was some feedback from someone that made her alter something. I just let her have that because I am of the mind, I'll be damned if one person, even 5, tell me something should change, because this is my show. I'll consider it. But I'm not about to do major changes like she was doing to please the minutia. Now here's the climax. We would try to meet daily, and I only had 3 hours of time that I was dedicating to this, which is a lot, and my productivity was high. So from time to time, we always start by checking in with each other, how's your day going and everything of that nature, okay? And on this particular day, I was having a difficult time emotionally with my husband. Not bad, but I did need to vent before I approached him about it. Everyone has something, like a love language. Mine is to feel wanted. Like, make me feel you want to be around me, want to talk to me, want me to be happy, all that. I needed more words of affirmation from him, and he was starting to slip, which then makes me slip back into the past offenses he did. And that's not fair to either of us. For me to do that, but you know what? I don't mind. Anyway, I was taking her through our 17-year marriage journey. And as I'm doing this, she is judging the hell out of me, telling me everybody ain't like you kind of shit. And I'm thinking, thank God. But what did I say that got you thinking I'm looking for advice versus just someone to listen to? We just wrapped up the call with her basically asking me to do stuff like I worked for her. Yep, another yellow flag. So the next day after this call we had, she said she was going to be out for the remainder of that week and that following Monday. When that Tuesday came, she sent me an email and said basically she's done with the podcast and needed to focus on some other things. Remember how I wanted to end my part of the business months earlier? And how she was all about talking out and we got to ride this out together. Yeah, she abandoned that pretty quick. I don't know if after that conversation she no longer saw me as a friend or if she just didn't give a damn. But for me, that was it for our friendship. And I texted her the same way she emailed me. I basically said, you played me, but you know what? Fool me once. You know the rest. In retrospect, my therapist really helped me with this because this was on my mind. It was hurtful. And I was trying to just work this through emotionally, and I needed a little help. So she helped. She helped me through this. And this is what I realized through that session. When we coached basketball, she was the head coach, and I was the assistant coach. And I believe she could have conjured up that scenario and applied it here, even though we were 50-50 partners. Also, it sounds like I was excelling in the part of my contribution, and she didn't feel her expertise was as visible, so there may be some insecurity there. Lastly, because we clash with communication, I'm light-spoken when I speak, and she expressed to me that I needed to be more aggressive, and I remember telling her, "You won't like that." Of course, this is when she accused me of feeling like I was talking to her like she was stupid. Her words. But because she wanted me to do that, she wasn't accepting of my authentic self. This helped me tremendously because I was really angry. Listen, I bought into this venture, and to do that, I had to drop 3 of my accounts, from the consulting firm that I own. And each account was a minimum of $100K each, okay? And you're gonna disregard that kind of sacrifice. And yes, she knew that I had done that. I wasn't bragging. I was explaining the investment I was putting into this. I'm with you. This experience has left me never wanting to enter into a business with a friend ever. Now, I partner with others, for their services, but we are our own entities. And I want to say, and I go off the cuff here, I really do wish her the best. I feel that we were on a good path, and to be quite frank, I feel that she had a vision, and it was so rigid that there was not enough room to include what I wanted as well in there. And so when that happens, it's very difficult to work with someone like that. But not all was lost, because I did learn a few things from her. She would say, "I appreciate you." And I remember thinking, I don't hear that enough. And I feel like others don't either. I have now made that part of my interactions with people because, as I've said before, words have meaning. Trademarking. Yo, anybody who is out there with a logo, a business name, a tagline, slogan, what have you, get that shit trademarked. You don't want to be out here getting sued because you are monetizing off something somebody has already laid claim to. Patience. I realized I have quite a bit of patience. Not as much as Joe, but dealing with someone who doesn't necessarily have a huge capacity of patience certainly validated that for me. But it also helped me with making my points more concise. Elevator pitch style. So, we had some golden nuggets, and you know how we do. We add that ketchup just to recap. 1. Always seek your own legal advice. This isn't to question your partner, but the way I look at it is, in God we trust, everybody else we check. 2. Don't compromise early. You are setting the expectation to be, dare I say, a pushover. And it takes a lot of work to get that back when you let it go in the first place. 3. Start slow so that the investment isn't so high that it raises the risk as well. 4. If you are feeling the walls of unappreciation closing in, do a quick check. And if that isn't satisfactory, it's okay to walk away. Don't force it. And 5. Don't ever let anyone put you in a box. I'm conjuring Patrick Swayze and Dirty Dancing. Nobody puts Crystal in a corner. Since jumping out on my own, I feel I have been doing the dang thing. What is it that they say these days? You feel me? Well, that's the episode today. Have any of you had experiences with business ventures with friends? What was the outcome? How did or is that working out? Drop a comment if you can relate to the struggle of managing friendship with business. Even if you hadn't had this experience, I'd still love to hear how you took the steps to make sure that the friendship remained intact while the business activities remained separate. I love it all, and so will someone else. Make sure you guys subscribe to the show, Moving with Meaning the podcast, and tap that alert bell so you know when these episodes drop. I'm on Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, and Spotify. If I get enough downloads and follows, I might be inspired to drop a few episodes in a single week. So please share, like, repost, and follow. Quick housekeeping before you go. Follow me on Instagram at movingwithmeaning82 and my Facebook page, Moving with Meaning. Also connect with me on LinkedIn. I do dabble a bit in TikTok at Crystal B. Clark. Links are in the episode. Alrighty. I'm Crystal on Moving with Meaning the podcast, reminding you to take it one step at a time. All moves have meaning. Check y'all later.